Hello and welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I'm joined by Osceola recruiting analyst and writer Nick Carlisle. Nick, big weekend. How's your early part of your week gone so far?
I'm just getting ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. Florida and Edmonton, game one. My Cats going for a repeat, and I'm super excited for that. And also lamenting my baseball team. The Miami Marlins somehow managed so the Colorado Rockies are the worst team in baseball, right?
They lost to the Rockies today.
They lost the series to the Rockies. So it's the first series win that the Rockies have had all season. And if you told me that the Miami Marlins were going to be the team to give that to them, I would have 100% believed you, because this organization has been booty cheeks for the better part of my entire adult life. And it's horrible. It's a disgrace. They need to sell the team. And so I'm balancing the emotions between that happening with my sports fandom, but also being super excited that the Florida Panthers are what they are right now, potentially going for a dynasty.
Well, you do know that the Marlins won a World Series before you were born, right?
Yes, they won a couple before I were born. So, I always say I was born just in time for them to win a couple of pennants, and born a little bit too late or whatever for he's probably see the next one because it's probably not going to happen for a long while.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to be all right with your Panthers. I think they're on their way to their second one in a row. I believe that they've seen
it's hard. It's hard to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs for 3 years in a row, or the Stanley Cup finals for 3 years in a row. So I worry about the wear and tear, but we've got a real good team, and I'm excited. And I'm excited to be watching some hockey once again, because it's my favorite playoffs out of all the sports.
You better get in all the hockey you can in the middle of the week, because we've got a busy weekend with Florida State hosting somewhere between 16 and 20 official visitors. I lost count. Nick and I have been working on that all day, and anyway, they've got it's going to be a big weekend. The next 3 weekends, obviously, are the 3 biggest official visit weekends that Florida State will hold this summer. They've also got some big midweek visits next week, and we'll get into that, including Keyshawn Henderson. We'll talk at length about that on Monday's show. But we do want to break down the official visit weekend for this weekend. And as we said, there are 16 or 17 kids on campus, and if you're watching the show, you can certainly see the crawl at the bottom of the screen that lists who is here and the positions they play. And we're not going to talk about each and every kid on today's show, simply because it would take too long. And so what Nick and I are going to do is we've asked ourselves some questions, and if you want to read our updates, now we did have fresh, updated information on each kid that's coming in this weekend, the latest from their official visits, what they've been saying, what the industry has been saying about each and every one of these kids. That will be online a little bit later today or possibly tomorrow, as Nick and I put the finishing touches on that. But Nick, there are let's start. I know you got 3 questions for each of us, but let's start with, I'll ask you a question. Who are the guys this weekend that stand? And we're going to talk about one in particular piece, but 3 in particular piece. But who are the headline guys to you in this particular weekend?
I think some of the headline guys. There's a couple of prospects that have been committed to other programs for a while that are coming in this week. Jazavian Currents, Devin Carter, being 2 of those that are really good prospects that Florida State has been trying to produce a flip with, and Currents being an interesting one, being the fact that Florida State appears to be the only program that Currents is still predominantly considering, despite being committed to. despite being committed to South Carolina since October. So if he does show up on campus this week, that's really interesting. But in terms of like who I consider to be the most important official visitor this week, or a couple of them, defensive end Tristan Givens is certainly one. He's probably at the top of their defensive end board, a defensive end board that is declining in numbers quickly. I think we're expecting to see another defensive end in Xavier Griffin-Haynes come off the board tomorrow. I have put in a future cast for North Carolina there. So that's another priority defensive end target that's going to be more than likely coming off the board. So with more and more defensive ends coming off the board in recent weeks, Tristan Givens becomes even more of an important official visitor, even more so than he already was. So that's one of my more important official visitors. We could talk about the other two if you want right now. We're a little bit down the line, but I think if I'm circling one name on the board, it's probably Tristan Givens for me.
Well, and we now just to get into your first question, who are the three most important? I'm assuming Tristan's on your list because he's also on mine. Listen, they don't have a defensive end committed onto this class right now. Obviously, there's been a lot of fanfare about the lack of effort and energy put into the recruitment of Cam Brooks out of Thomasville, Georgia, who has now canceled his official visit. So I think that not only is this a position of need for Florida State, and who his recruitment is not wide open, as you said, it's basically down to Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Florida State. This would be a great kid for Florida State to make a close on, and possibly even get a commitment out of this weekend. Listen, he's closer to Florida State's campus than either of the other two campuses, Tennessee and Texas A&M. Now, he's been up to Tennessee a number of times as he's been to Florida State. The fact that he's got Texas A&M on the back end of these visits kind of makes me think that that's the order that they're in right now, right? I think it's Texas A&M, Tennessee, Florida State. This is one that Florida State and Terrence Knighton and Mike Norvell need to show that they can close on. He's not necessarily in the backyard. He's not any more outside of the backyard than Trenton Henderson, who's in Pensacola, about the same distance-wise, about 2.5 to 3 hours. I think this one would make the fan base feel better if they could lock this kid down. Obviously, he is as bad as of any of the prospects that have come on that aren't committed to Florida State. He is about as focused in on as few schools as any one prospect is. So Tristan Givens would be one of my three most important visitors. So I'll throw it back to you for your number two guy on that list.
Yeah, and just also with Tristan Givens, you talk about, Terrence Knighton and Mike Norvell being able to close on a prospect. If you want to break narratives about not being able to close on prospects, especially on the defensive line, this is a kid that'll do that for you. Yep. If you can land him, that absolutely smashes the narrative. And it's certainly not an impossible win. I do think that the SEC programs are in the lead. I think it's curious because I think he actually has a crystal ball or prediction or a on-3 prediction machine or a future cast. One of the three major sites has actually forecasted him to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I do think Florida State is the third team in this, but it's not like it's a far shot off. Like, he has been back on campus multiple times. So I think that does work in Florida State's favor. But the second guy that I have on my list is actually a guy that I got offered relatively recently, and that's 4-star offensive tackle Aaron Thomas. I think when you take a look at the offensive tackle talent that they have already brought in, obviously I think Sam Rosenborough is a guy that's also a priority at the position, but there's not really many of those true fire offensive tackles that they have on their board right now. I think this is a prospect that Florida State has a very good chance of landing. I know that you did your research and you said that, well, his father's collegiate career at Florida State isn't going to factor into his decision. You never know. Kids can say that, but I also feel like maybe that does still weigh a little bit, even though they may not openly say it. So I think it's an important that they get him on campus again. I think this is the first time that he's been as a recruit. Obviously, he's been plenty as a fan of the program and as a legacy athlete. But I think if you were able to go and grab this kid out of Arizona, I think he's probably one of the better offensive tackle prospects on the board. And I think it's an important visit.
Yeah. Now, I did not have him in my top 3 visits. I had him for one of your other questions, and that was the official visitor that Florida State needs to make up the most ground with. And just to kind of echo some of your talking points, listen, Florida State did not offer this Aaron Thomas until late April. It was one of the first prospects that Herb Hand flew out to see after spring practice was over. And when you read his pre-visit official visit article, which he did after one of his official visits, it's clear that Florida State, and I don't want to say behind, because they have not been recruiting Aaron as long as these other schools that are involved with him. So I don't know that it's more about making up ground. It's about speeding up the relationship process and making sure this kid and his family have a good feeling about this program after he leaves campus this weekend. I think the distance does hurt them with Aaron. I think the fact that his dad did play here, I do think it carries weight. And he did not necessarily, I don't think when he said that, he said it in a negative sense of things, but I think people, of always assuming, well, I'm going to do what my dad did. I'm going to follow in his footsteps. That's kind of a natural assumption for people to make. And so I think that he was just saying, hey, if I choose Florida State, I'm choosing Florida State because I feel like it's best for me, not because my father went there. But when you read what he said, you can tell the relationships that he has with the other coaches have lasted longer, because he talks individually about each individual. He talks about Kyle Flood at Texas, his ability to put people in the pros, and said the same thing about Ohio State's offensive line history. So I think it's more about, hey, we've got to microwave this relationship because it hasn't been here very long, and I think they need to hit this home run out. This official visit out of the park. It needs to be a home run with Aaron Thomas to put them in a position to sign him in December. So he was to answer your question, he was my ground to make up guy, and that's because the relationship is so new. Now, my second most important official visit, and you're probably going, well, since I think where you're going with it, I'm going to go with Samari Matthews. He's one of mine. I think we're going to share the other one. But Samari,
we're actually going to share this one. So
okay.
Samari was actually number 3 for me. And in case you didn't pick up on it, for those that are watching live, Pat and I have not talked about this one another.
Yeah.
So this is blind. This is fully blind. And maybe now that you said Samari, I'll switch it up. But so continue on.
Samari, to me, listen, I think he becomes more important after Caden Hall committed to Florida yesterday, and obviously has canceled his official visit to Florida State this weekend. They seem to have a really good relationship with Samari. My personal belief is that South Carolina probably leading the way. And if you look at his official visits, old school way of thinking, the last official visit is probably the school you're favoriting. Is your favorite, at least going in to official visits. Now, that doesn't mean Florida State can't make up his mind. He's already been to Miami. He's got Texas coming up after Florida State. Texas got in a little bit late with Samari. They seem to be the trending team with him because they are relatively new. I don't think he got offered with them until this spring. Went out there for an unofficial visit. And obviously when, as we've talked about before, when you're fighting against Texas, you're also fighting against a big NIL budget. But listen, Samari's been down here a number of times, and I think he checks a lot of boxes. We've interviewed him. We've done extensive talks with Samari, and he is. And I tell you guys all the time, keep your personal feelings out of this. It's recruiting. Nothing makes sense. It doesn't matter. But this is a kid that we've gotten to know a little bit. I think he's a kid that can come in and play early. He's physically mature. He's mentally mature when you talk to him. And I think that because he's got Texas and South Carolina coming up, you got to leave an impression with him before he goes to Austin and Columbia, because I do think Texas is a trending school. South Carolina has been the long-term projected leader. But he has made an effort to get down here, and I think Florida State, this is a very important visit for Samari.
Yeah, I agree. And it's Florida State. It's kind of been weird for Florida State because they've been able to hang around in this recruitment. And they've been able to hang around it for a while, but every single time Samari has come down to Florida State, whether that be in January or for the Legacy Weekend in March. It seems like Florida State had some catching up to do, and they were able to do that coming out of the visit. Coming out of January, you felt better about where they stood with Samari. Coming out of the Legacy Weekend, after we talked to him, some of the comments that he made, it's like, well, maybe they have a real shot at landing this kid. I completely agree with your assessment of him. I think personally he's a great kid, but just outside of that, he's one of the more dynamic defensive backs that are available in this class right now, that are left uncommitted. He certainly got the body type. He has the ability to play early. That's why I had him at number 3 in my most important visitors. But to be a little bit different, I'll switch it up and I'll switch my 3rd from Samari to Devin Carter, who I think that in terms of wide receiver prospects, in terms of who they have on the board, in terms of the talent that's available, this is a guy that maybe has cooled off a little bit in terms of the ratings or whatever, but ratings be what they are. He's a dynamic kid, and there's not really that many prospects that can do what he does in the combination of his skill set, whether that be playing out of the slot, playing outside. Obviously, he was committed to Florida State for a time, opened things back up. And I just think we talked earlier about, narrative breakers with Tristan Gibbons. You want to talk about a narrative breaker for Florida State recruiting? If you're able to flip this kid back after the poor wide receiver play and poor wide receiver coaching kind of pushed him out and didn't have him really considering you as early as December and January of this year, to be able to come all the way back and potentially flip that commitment. If that were, or flip that commitment, if that were to happen, that would be huge for recruiting momentum for Florida State. So that's also a really important visit. I'm curious.
Especially when he's got Auburn and North Carolina behind Florida State on that visit list. So listen, I will say this. I think Devin Carter's recruitment is not going to be over even until December. I agree. I think this is going to be one where you might see him, like Georgia. He's came out very impressed with his Georgia official visit this past weekend. We've never heard a kid come out of an official visit and say I had a bad time. We've never heard a kid say that. We've had a couple that have had bad body language after an unofficial visit. We've seen some of that in the past, but very few times have we seen a kid have a bad time on an official visit. But I do think that Devin's recruitment will be as fluid as it has been I think the next 6 months.
I agree, and I think it's important to note that it originally was going to be Auburn and Florida State as like the 2 teams that got official visits, and then Dexter came out with a social media post saying we're going to take a visit to North Carolina and Georgia as well to fully experience all the options in the recruiting process, which is code for it's gonna be a drawn out process most likely. I don't want to put words in the mouth, but when I read that, that's what I think.
I do think that Dexter wants him here. I do think that I do think that's where Dexter wants him. I haven't talked to Dexter in a long time, but he was on one of Devin's unofficial visits the last time I spoke with him, and I think I think it might matter to him where his, I don't know if Eric Thomas, I don't know if he has I'm sure he'd be proud if his son went to Florida State where he played. But anyway, I think Devin's recruitment's going to last until December. Listen, a lot of these guys will. He's not the only one, that's for sure. All right, so the guy I had rated as the second most important of my 3 official visits was your good buddy DQ Forkpaw. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you did some great reporting when you were down at Miami's Rivals camp where he was working out, and kind of the hubbub there at camp was that Florida State, for whatever reason, had kind of fallen out of the good graces, had not listened or paid attention to what Forkpaw and his family were communicating with them. Sounded like they were putting too much pressure on the kid when the kid was trying to get them to lay off a little bit. Clearly, they have gotten back in the picture with this official visit, but as you have written, it looks like Florida and Miami just have as good a chance to land Forkpaw as does Florida State. At some point, you've got to beat these two guys in state on prospects that you have a shot at. And they lost out to Caden Hall to Florida earlier this week. Kyron Maycock, who is committed to Florida State, is not a lock. He is still getting a lot. And listen, you could probably put every single linebacker in town this weekend on this particular list, but Forkpaw is the one I know more about, the one I've seen more tape on, the kid I have talked to the most. And so to me, whatever the gray area was or wherever this misunderstanding was between the kid and the program, when he leaves Sunday to go back home, whatever that was needs to be handled, put by the wayside, and they need to know how they're going to get this kid to the finish line in December.
Yeah, absolutely. DQ is actually the player that I had listed for the second question, which is who does Florida State need to make up some ground with? Okay. He may, in terms of like the amount that Florida State needs to make up ground with, there are definitely some other prospects that are going to be coming this weekend that probably they need to make up a lot more ground with, like maybe like an Ernest Rankins, who's a defensive tackle from, I can't even remember the high school now that I'm thinking about it, but he hasn't. I don't think he's been on campus this year, if at all. So, like, if we're talking about pure like distance between the leaders and where Florida State is, that's a type of guy that probably has the biggest gap. But in terms of attainable prospects, I think Florida State has ground to make up with DQ. I may have been a little bit coy when I felt that Florida and Miami have overleaped Florida State. I think that's definitely true, and I think maybe there's a bit of a bigger gap than previously thought, but. Yeah, no, this is you kind of hit on the talking points. It's when I went down to Miami, I was really surprised to see that Florida State was trending in the wrong direction. I think John Papuchis has done great work in terms of rekindling that and making sure that Florida State is going to get a shot here in his recruitment by getting him on campus for an official visit. But Miami coming in and offering him a couple of weeks ago and them already getting on his official visit slate, and not only that, getting the last slot, the last scheduled visit on his slate. Whether or not you attend to the ideology of the last is first type of mentality, depending on whether you adhere to that or not. Miami getting involved and seemingly jumping to the top of the contenders. He had been on a couple of unofficial visits, so it's not like it's coming out of nowhere. But I definitely feel worse about Florida State's chances now that Miami has also thrown their hat in the ring, and Florida seems to be the favorite right now with multiple future casts in. So if Florida State can make up some ground here, maybe smooth over some of the remaining marbles here in terms of whatever the communication riff was earlier in the year, he's still, without a doubt, one of their priority targets at linebacker, him along with Karan Maycock. So I think it's important that you hit it out of the park with DQ this weekend to give yourself a shot to in what is turning into El Clasico, the three P4 the three P4 Florida schools going at it with one another.
Yeah. All right. So who was your third most important visitor of the week?
That was originally Samari Matthews, but I switched it up because you went Samari and I went Devin Carter.
Okay, so we've covered the three most important.
We've covered the three. For the actual story, we'll probably leave it Samari Matthews, but for the entertainment purposes here, I shoved in Devin Carter there. So
all right, and you've done your most important visitor, right? That was Aaron.
That was Tristan Givens.
Tristan Givens.
So my three went Tristan, and have it on my notes here: Tristan Givens, Aaron Thomas, Samari Matthews. At 3-A, Devin Carter.
Yeah. So I went Matthews, Forkpot, Givens. All right, so we're almost in lockstep on all of that. So we're reading the tea leaves the same. All right, so. All right, I'm going to do two different things because you put the question, who is on Flip Watch on this weekend? So let's go through this quickly and get people up to date. All right, so wide receiver Madden Williams is in town. He is committed to Texas.
Or he's supposed to be.
Well, he's supposed to be coming to town. I'm talking like we're doing this live and it's Friday because that's normally when we do it. But there's baseball Friday and we're going to do a baseball preview. So anyway, long story short, Madden Williams is supposed to be in town. He's committed to Texas A&M, a rival's top 250 prospect, and committed to A&M and has been since December. Daniel Odom, his teammate from St. John Bosco in California, is supposed to be here. He is committed to Oklahoma and has been since January. Then you have, Mike Ioannetta is committed to Florida State, so we're not going to call a flip there. Then you have Jazavian Currents, who's committed to South Carolina. You've got Devin Carter committed to Auburn. You've got Javion Cooper, the offensive tackle, committed to Syracuse. And those are the committed guys that we know about coming in this weekend. So if I had to pick a flip, I think if they were going to flip a guy this weekend, I am going. And the distance bothers me with this prediction, but if I had to guess, it's Daniel Odom at St. John Bosco. If they're going to flip a kid this weekend, his schools are narrowed down. He's committed to Oklahoma. Does not visit them until June 20th. His only other official has been to Washington. Official visit was to Washington last weekend, and so. He told Rivals in May that he's 100% committed, but that schools like Washington, FSU, Miami, and Texas were not slowing down their efforts to flip him. He did speak recently about his unofficial visit to Florida State the spring or summer prior to the start of his junior season. Talked about how just the entire building made him feel, and also talked about his close relationship with Mike Norvell. So if I had to pick a guy that just based off what they're saying and doing, and listen, he's not a kid you're going to see on campus a lot because it's a 3,000-mile trip, but but he's obviously willing to leave home if he's going to go from Bellflower, California to Norman, Oklahoma. So I'm going to go with Daniel Odom on flip watch for the committed kids. What about you?
I actually wasn't expecting that answer out of you. I don't know who I was expecting, but but that was probably at the bottom of the list for me in terms of who I thought you were going to say. I may cheat here and say I don't think any of them are on flip watch. I don't think any of them are going to flip to Florida State. If it were to happen this weekend, obviously this is all hypothetical fun, but yes. I just can't see it. Maybe it seems like, so if I want to match you in terms of maybe who I perceive to just be a long shot, it's really interesting to me that Jazavian Currents has taken an official visit to Florida State, given that he has been committed to South Carolina for 7-8 months. Yeah, something about that, something around there. And Florida State is the only school to be getting an official visit. Now, we may wake up tomorrow and find out that he's not going to come at all. But his relationship with Mike Norvell is really strong. And this was a school that he was seriously considering before he committed to South Carolina. So wouldn't it be just an insane out of this world flip if Florida State if Mike Norvell just hit it out of the park and they were able to flip Jazavian? It's out there. I don't think it'll happen, but which is what. So I guess the answer really is non-applicable for me. I don't think anybody's on flip watch. But
getting a kid out of Rock Hill, South Carolina would be awesome. I mean, that's Clemson, South Carolina territory all the way. And of course, now Florida State has signed kids out of Rock Hill in the past, but so it's not like it has not been done before by Florida State. But listen, that would be a good one.
Wasn't that a wide receiver from Rock Hill last year? Oh God, what's his name?
I know who you're talking about, but I cannot remember.
I don't know if it was exactly the same high school. It's going to bother me now.
Okay.
Well, anyways, he did end up committing to Florida State and then flipped to decommit and
now
go to South Carolina.
I will say this:
it's been done before. It has been done before.
If Devin Carter flipped, it would not surprise me, just because I think that was going to be full of drama anyway. So
yeah.
All right. So not flip watch, but. And I don't think you have to limit this to one necessarily. I do think we're going to start seeing some commitments coming, and we already obviously know that Mike Ioannetta is coming into this weekend committed to Florida State, and he does not have any other official visits planned. So we don't think anybody's going to flip this weekend away from Florida State. But if you had to name a prospect or two that you could see committing to Florida State coming out of this weekend, who would they be? And it may be nobody.
No, I definitely have somebody in mind, and that is American Heritage wide receiver Brandon Bennett.
You stole mine, Nick. That was my guy.
Oh God. Probably for the same reasons that you have him listed.
Yeah.
American Heritage kid, obviously the connection to Pat Surtain. He's got a great relationship with Tim Harris, and that dated Tim Harris's tenure at Florida State. So the relationships are very strong here. He's high on their board. He fits what they're looking for this cycle at wide receiver, which is smaller, speedy guys. He has already taken an official visit to, I can't remember if it was Florida or Georgia, one of the two. I think it might have been Georgia first. He remained uncommitted out of that visit, and he could just be waiting, as they're more than allowed to do.
Yeah.
I feel that out of everybody on the wide receiver board, they're in the best position for Brandon Bennett. I think that especially with who Georgia has committed at wide receiver right now, I think Florida State's competition is Florida. And I think that the relationship with both Patrick Surtain and Tim Harris, if somebody were to pull the trigger this weekend, would be able to get Florida State over the hump. So I'm sure you agree with that, considering he was your guy. Yeah, maybe you want to make a 180 here, or maybe you had multiple prospects.
I am looking. Listen, now it would not surprise me if you saw. I don't know. TJ White's got too many official visits left. Really, I mean, Tennessee, Mississippi State. I'm going to say he's going to play the string out a little bit. The guy that interests me, and the guy that you asked this question, we took it off the list. Who intrigues you, or you most interested in learning more about coming out of this weekend?
And we can bring it back.
And I think I would go with Mitchell Smith, the offensive lineman out of Pecan, Mississippi, who canceled an Auburn visit to visit Florida State, and then canceled an LSU visit to visit Alabama. And so he was initially going to come to Florida State midweek. And I know I make more of the midweek visits than I should. Like, it's different. It's different time now. It's the month of June is about official visits. It's not old school December weekend official visits, January weekend official visits, because obviously kids are in school during the week during those times. So I've got to get rid of this old school mentality that the midweek official visits don't mean as much as the weekend official visits, because that's just not the way the game works anymore. But
yeah,
I was glad to see that he did come in for a weekend official visit, because I do have that old school mentality, and they did kick Auburn out and Alabama kicked LSU out. Now, he did say after he got offered by Alabama in late May, I mean, I'm talking about very late May, that Alabama had been his dream school growing up. So they are thought to be the leader, but not by what people are reporting, especially Sam Spiegelman with Rivals. The sources have told Sam that even though Alabama is a dream school, whatever lead they have is narrow. Like, he is all in on all four of these schools, being Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Alabama. LSU was in it. They're apparently not anymore. Neither is Auburn. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he has to say coming out of this visit. Because the fact of the matter is, we don't know a lot about Mitchell. We have not seen him on campus that I can remember. So he would be the one guy that I'm really intrigued to see how this develops coming out of this weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar vein. The guy that I was looking at when looking at the list and didn't really know much about was IMG Academy's Cam Brinkle.
Yeah.
Or Brickle, sorry. And I didn't know too much about his recruitment. I know that he was here in March for a quick unofficial visit where he was offered. And I don't know, whenever Knighton jokingly said, "Oh, I thought we offered you already." For me, that would kind of be like, screw you, buddy. Where is my actual offer? If I were in the kid's shoes, but of course I probably shouldn't say that to my position coach. Anyways, I was really interested to see kind of like what his story is, like who is recruiting him. And he's got a lot of really big schools recruiting him. Ohio State being one of them, Penn State being the other, Ohio State, according to some sites. So Florida State is in deep competition with a 3-star defensive tackle that you would have thought they would have had the geographical advantage for, but he's actually from Pennsylvania, which I thought was interesting. And Penn State does have the last official visit slot. So if this is a narrative arc where, you know, the kid wants to go back home and put on for his state and his city or his town or wherever or whatever you want to call it, you know, I think that's very interesting. But in terms of defensive tackle prospects that are on the board, you and I both know how far and few between the list is actually at that position. So I would be interested to see if Florida State can actually make some headway here in this recruitment, knowing that they are going to have at least a geographical advantage in terms of where he is currently, not where he's going to potentially end up and where he is actually from. So it's a very interesting one. And you could also argue that, you know, they need to catch up some ground in the recruitment, considering that they came in so late with an offer. But that is a recruitment that intrigues me, and it intrigues me if Florida State can make some ground there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think what Knighton said to him, I thought you already had an offer. I think what he's basically telling the kid is the last group didn't know what the hell they were doing. They should have.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I think that's probably what he was telling. Hey, I don't know who's been evaluating defensive linemen at Florida State, but they misevaluated you. I think is exactly what he was trying to say, tell the kid in kind of a humorous way. But yeah. So
but wouldn't that have been Odell Higgins though?
Well, I mean, obviously there's other people. I mean, there's a
I know.
Now. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, listen, Odell makes mistakes. Listen, every coach makes mistakes.
Everybody makes mistakes.
There's not been a coach that's got every evaluation of his career right. Nope. I can assure you of that. I spent enough time inside college football to understand that there are missed evaluations for whatever reason. But yeah, I think that was probably Terrence's funny way of saying, "Hey, we screwed the pooch on this one, buddy. We should have offered you a long time ago." And hopefully that went over well with Cam. But yeah, so I don't see. I see that you know. Listen, maybe he'll fall in love with the Florida weather and won't want to go back to the cold winters of State College or wherever. Where's Penn State? It's not State College. College Park. Anyway. Wherever Penn State is, and I should know that. I've been around football long enough. But anyway, so we'll see. All right, so let's do this. Just so everyone knows who's coming, and I'm just going to give you the name, and you say long shot, 50-50, or FSU is the leader. So,
okay.
All right. Madden Williams, wide receiver.
Long shot.
Yeah, long shot. He's already committed to Texas A&M, got USC coming up after, has already been to Arizona State and Washington. Distance is too much. Daniel Odom, I've got him on flip watch. So obviously I'm thinking FSU's fixing to take the lead in this one. What do you got on Daniel Odom?
Yeah, you've worked yourself into a hole there, pal.
I'm doubling down, buddy. I'm doubling down on it.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I respect you for it. Well, what are my options? Long shot, 50-50, or FSU lean?
Yeah.
We'll go. No, it's a long shot. It's a long shot, I think.
All right. Aaron Thomas, offensive lineman, has visited Washington, and Ohio State has Texas and Texas A&M. I'm going long shot on Aaron Thomas.
50-50. I feel better about their chances than you.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you're right, because he is definitely an offensive tackle, and they need some true offensive tackles.
Yes, they do.
All right, Samari Matthews, I'm going 50-50. I think Florida State's got a shot here. Don't think it's a long shot. Don't think they're in the lead. So I think it is what it is. I think they've got to knock off South Carolina this weekend.
Yeah, I'll go 50-50 as well. Like I said when we talked about him earlier, it always feels like FSU has some catching up to do when he gets on campus. Maybe they do a whole lot of catching up this weekend and actually put themselves in the conversation. But as it is right now, in terms of his top four, FSU is definitely not one or two. So probably 50-50 is comfortable.
Yeah, and listen, I don't know what our plus-minus margin is on 50-50 because but I want to go long shot, FSU lean, or just kind of wide open. But, yeah, Rodney Colton.
It's a hard one to read.
I don't think it's a long shot, and I definitely don't think it's a lean. So I'm not sure it's necessarily 50-50 to Florida State, but I think they're in it still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so I think Well, his recruitment is and has been wide open, and I mean completely wide open when he decommitted from South Carolina in January. He's been all over the map. I did read some of his comments at UCLA from his UCLA official visit. He's certainly a character, I'll tell you that. He's certainly a fun kid. But if we're going off of, I think it's good that he's visited. I think it's good that Florida State has been able to work their way onto his summer schedule as opposed to being originally scheduled for some point in the fall. The fact that he wanted to come back as soon as possible and bring his family to check out Florida State. I don't know if that's probably not an experience unique to Florida State, but at least for my feeling of it, that makes me feel a lot better about Florida State's chances. So it's 50-50, but I agree with you. Maybe 75-25. He's not leaning by any, but it's a wide open recruitment that I think Florida State has a genuine shot at.
Well, maybe the question is, who do we think leads right now? All right, so TJ White, linebacker, Jackson Academy, has been to North Carolina, has been to Auburn, has Tennessee and Mississippi State after Florida State. I am going to say I agree with you in what you wrote. It appears to be relatively wide open, but I would give a little bit of a lead to Mississippi State.
Yeah, I would too. If at all, because Mississippi kids are hard to get out of their state sometimes. Florida State has done it in the past. But it kind of that similar like part of the country, Alabama, Mississippi, even Texas to a certain extent. Hard to get kids out of their home state. So I think it's 50-50. I think his recruitment is wide open. The fact that Mississippi State is his last official visit, also a kid from Mississippi, wouldn't be surprised if Mississippi leads there or Mississippi State leads there.
All right. So the only two kids we have not talked about, Javion Cooper, who's committed to Syracuse, the Melbourne Central Catholic offensive tackle, was at Florida last week, has Syracuse on June 13th, and right now has UCF on June 20th. I think this is Syracuse, Florida right now. I think Florida State could put themselves in it for sure. They are in it right now, but I think to get to P1 or P2, just based on everything that's been reported by Rivals throughout the history of his recruitment, including an article that came out after his Florida visit, I think that the Gators are most likely to flip him, but he's been on Florida's campus. He's not been on Florida State for his official visit yet, so I'm not saying that Florida State can't do that, but I think right now Florida – now this, the weekend, this is what these weekends for, right? To change the storyline, to change the narrative. But right now, I would say Florida going into this weekend has the best chance of flipping Cooper from Syracuse.
Yeah, I think he's a long shot. I'm not so sure where he is on Florida State's board compared to other prospects. I do think that Florida probably, if there's a team that's going to flip him, it's going to be Florida. So Florida State's a long shot here. But to your point, it's not like Florida State is so far behind that they can't get back in this one. Yeah. I think to a certain extent they have gotten back in this one if they're getting them on campus officially. But I don't think that Florida State is in the fight enough yet for me to consider this a quote-unquote 50-50 recruitment.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then the only kid we have not mentioned now, we've covered all 16, 17, 27, however many there are.
34. 17, 38.
Yeah, well, this morning it seemed like 50. So Carson Baker, the 4-star running back from Langston Hughes in Fairburn, Georgia, has been to Florida, has been to Clemson, has Florida State, and then right now only South Carolina. Sounds like Ohio State may try to get involved. I'm not positive. There is a possibility that he will take – Michigan came in, I guess, last week or the week before and offered. There is a report on Rivals that he is considering a Michigan official visit. There's only one prediction on him in the entire industry, and that has him going to Florida. The weird thing to me was his official visit date at Florida was May 16th. Typically, and I know calendar's different than old days, but typically you don't commit to the first school you visit. Unless you're Mike Ionata, who's only going to do one visit. So there's outliers and everything. But so
that actually it feels like a lot more kids are committing in the first week, and maybe it's just because it's kids that Florida State are in on. But it feels like there were a lot more kids committing to the first week.
I do think it's just the continued evolution. I think we may be getting into, back in the day, the official visits were right before National Signing Day, right? They were every weekend in January. You had usually kids visit one place in December and then 4 in January, and then they signed the first week of February. So I do think we're probably seeing some patterns that are different than what we're used to. And that's something I've got to wrap my head around, because it could be that these kids can't wait to get back on that particular campus, and because they are their favorite. So there could be some of that. But yeah, so anyway, Carson Baker, I'm going to say 50-50. Now, I still think it's going to be hard to sign two great backs, two highly sought-after backs. You've already got Amari Thomas committed to this class, and you hold on to him. What's your likelihood of saying, hey, come in here, it's going to be you, Amari, Osman Kroma, Cam Davis, and I don't know who else, but right now, Makai's moved to wide receiver, so it really does. You don't include him in the running backs anymore. But anyway, yeah. So I think I'm gonna go 50. I'm gonna go 50-50 with Carson. I don't know that there is a leader. Like I said, there's only one prediction in the entire industry, and usually this is when these guys that like to do predictions are flooding their sites with these predictions. And so I think this is pretty wide open. I think Florida State's got a chance here to make some ground and make some hay with Carson this week. And listen, I think these running backs will be watching how Florida State uses their running backs as far as snaps, right? As far as is Florida State a 2 running back friendly offense? Is Gus going to substitute as freely as Mike and his staff have done in the past, or is it going to be more like it was at UCF last year, where the top running back, the top dog, and of course they had a great top dog in RJ Harvey. They didn't have there was no doubt who their top running back was last year. Yeah. So I think that'll play a factor in it. But yeah, I'm gonna go 50-50 on Carson.
Yeah, I'll go 50-50 as well. I think what we have seen is that the kid, for no fault of his own, is very prone to visit highs. He left his Florida State visit feeling really good about Florida State. Then he went to Ohio State and felt really good about Ohio State. And then he took his official visit to Florida, and there was a prediction for him to Florida. So the fact that was a couple weeks ago and that prediction hasn't come true yet, makes me think that this may be one of those situations where he leaves each official visit feeling really, really good about each school. And, maybe we'll get an answer in July in terms of a commitment, but then it turns into one that, as you kind of alluded to, once the season starts, maybe it's something that the door isn't all the way closed and other schools can vie for a flip, because, and I've said this in terms of offensive recruiting as a whole. I think until recruits see Malzahn's offense and see that it works at Florida State, that recruiting on that side of the ball is going to be slow. We've heard things that it's an inside zone predominant running attack. Is that actually going to come true? Are they going to use more of their wide receivers? What does it look like? We have so many not misconceptions, but we have so many ideas about what this looks like, and until you actually see it, who really knows? So it's 50-50. I think one thing that I do know is that Florida State really likes Carson. I think out of all the other top guys left on the board, I think maybe they even prefer him. Obviously you have other guys like Jay Lamar who are extremely talented athletes. But I have to agree, 50-50.
Yep. All right. So Jay Holmes asks, why is FSU so far behind in a lot of the more important recruitments? Is it new staff, old staff, 2 and 10, or interest from the kids are low? Well, listen, I think a lot of it has to do with it's all been almost 2 months since they've received a commitment from anyone. And, you've got Florida and Miami and some other programs that are involved with Florida State kids at Florida State are recruiting that got commitments. We saw obviously Caden Hall and Genervy Carr, who both were on Florida State's board at various positions, commit to Florida. And I think some of it's perception. Now, Florida State does have 9 commitments already for this class, if I'm counting right.
Yes.
But you've got 2 of these kids committed in the fall of 2023, Ephraim White and Darrell Bell. Darion Williams committed last April, Tadarius Hughes last July, Xavier Payne last December. So over half your commitments have come in either 2024 or 2023 for this class. So I think, out of sight, out of mind, right? You're not talking about those kids as much as because your hope is that FSU's locked in with those kids, and it's what both the kid and the prospect want. I do think that 2 and 10 has a lot to do with it. I do think that some of these top line kids, and I think that's what you're asking about, Jay, some of the bigger name prospects, the competition is going to be really tough for, because you're recruiting against the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Texases, as we've alluded to when we break these kids down. When you see who Florida State is competing against, I think that these kids, and I think if Florida State shows substantial improvement on the field in 2025, I think there's going to be some kids they circle back to for this class that may be committed to other places. But I do think that it's important for some of these top tier prospects, the guys that you're fighting in the deep end of the pool for. I think it's going to be, I think they want to see proof is in the pudding. It's a combination of things. They got to build relationships with the new staff. If you're an offensive lineman that's been recruited by Florida State by the previous offensive line coach, you got to get used to Herb Hand. But I do think the kids want to see where this program is going. And then, we know that Florida State's got a good NIL program. Is it up top 10? We've talked about that before. No, but I think FSU's NIL that I know it to be, if they put some wins together on the field coupled with a substantial NIL deal, I think they can get some kids that maybe where they don't pay top dollar for, but because Florida State's an historic program that looks like it's going back in the right direction this season, I think they can get back in on some kids, and I think they'll start closing some of these kids that come in on official visits out once they get going this season.
Yeah, not too dissimilar from what Florida experienced last year, to be honest with you. I mean, we all went into the season last year thinking Florida might have ended up like 3-9 or something. So they had a good run at the back end of their season, and it had benefits on the recruiting trail where they were able to not only take some guys that were currently committed to Florida State, but some really high-profile guys like Dallas Wilson from Oregon and some other guys that they experienced a recruiting boom. But I also think you hit on something that's important, and that's that Florida State does have 9 commitments already. They're looking for a big class this year, but it's certainly a far cry from the 3 or 4 kids that they had committed at this time last year. And taking a look at Florida's commitment list, they're kind of in a similar boat. Prior to yesterday or the other day, I guess the last 2 commitments happened in the last 4 days. They only had 2 commitments on the board, Will Griffin and Jameer Perez. So Florida has a bit more room. Maybe they felt like they could take a couple more commitments now, and without perhaps scaring some other kids off, they have a lot of more work to do. So some of it does come down to the fact that Florida State has had a couple of guys committed for a long time, and even more committed for close to 6 or 7 months now. But I do think that, and this is a beat that we hit on the show all the time. So the fear of ad nauseum repeating, 2 and 10 definitely has a factor in it. The new staff, having to ingratiate yourself as new staff, has something to do with it. But I hate to be the doomer here, part of it is the fact that, like, if it looks like a duck and acts like a duck, then it's a duck. And the quacking is that Florida State has not been able to win these recruitments in the past. There is a level of recruiting there that I think at this point 5 years into, was it 5 or 6 years into the tenure of going into year 6 of the tenure of this regime? It's a flaw that you can't really ignore anymore. So honestly, it's a big melting pot of issues, Jay Holmes. I think we could probably sit here and talk for another 35 minutes about the woes and what's wrong with Florida State recruiting. Obviously, there are some positives that they've done the last few months that I've been pretty vocal about on the show. But I hope that'll answers your question. It's a huge melting pot. If things improve on the field, things should improve on the trail. So I think that's honestly, if we want to level it down to one sentence, there you go.
And listen, let's face it, whether it's a Florida State a kid that's committed to Florida State, or a kid that's committed to Florida or Miami or Auburn or Alabama or whoever, listen, the calendar gives Florida State time to get back in on some of these kids or solidify some of these kids. This is, it used to be that you sign with your school immediately after your official visit. That's not what's going on here. That you still got to get them to the finish line in December. And so I think that we could – now, do I think that every kid's committed to Florida State right now is going to end up at Florida State? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There will be changes. And those could be because Florida State chooses to go somewhere else for somebody else. Or it could be that the kid decommits from Florida State by his own volition. But I do think that it will be fluid. And I think when you've got official visits taking place for the most part 4 months before you sign, it's only natural that some of these commitments are not going to last. And that's just not for Florida State. It's for other folks. But, listen, I thought Florida State closed out they didn't do great at every position coming off that 2-10 season with the 2025 class. But certainly when you flip Cromon, you flip Arnaud on the last day, on the National Signing Day, which, by the way, the Osceola was the only site to report. Just in case you want to know who knew that. That was us. That was us. They'll have time to make up ground with guys that maybe commit to other schools but really like Florida State but just aren't sure where this program is headed. So this may be one instance where, it's because these official visits are happening before the season. It may benefit Florida State because they can prove themselves on the field, and it may open them back up to some other prospects that maybe are committed elsewhere right now or are not giving Florida State as much time as Florida State would like to receive from them. So it is, as Nick said, there's probably a lot of different reasons, but I do think one of the biggest is you're coming off a 2-10 season. Kids want to know who they're going to be, who the head coach is going to be. Now, I don't think Mike is going anywhere. As we get closer to the season, I talk to more people. I think it would take another catastrophic season. JP and I talked about it yesterday on his show in Tampa. We both agreed 4 wins or less would probably be what it would take to people to. But I do think people want to see Florida State, these kids specifically, get back to a bowl game. Show substantial improvement, show that they can have a functioning offensive line and an offense that can, doesn't not have a quarterback running for his life, and then, see what this new defense looks like and see how they use different position groups. So, but it's going to be a fun season.
It feels weird to say this for a regime that's entering year 6, but really it really is basically a reset if you want to think about it this way, in terms of you basically have to resell the vision to these recruits. Like maybe 2 years ago, you had something to sell in terms of things like Jared Verse and all of these guys coming in and being developed and having a 10-3 season and then a 13-0 season. Like you had that as a selling point for kids, but it almost feels like you have to reset things. You're having to sell kids on a new defense and what that looks like. And if it's successful, you have to sell kids on the fact that Florida State's going to have a pulse on the football field this year. And that takes time. That takes time. And, you brought up a good point. There are some guys that are on the commitment list right now that I don't think are going to stay on the commitment list. There's a couple of guys that I wouldn't be surprised if they're not in the class come December time. So it's constantly evolving. Recruiting is fluid, even more and increasingly more than maybe we'd like to admit sometimes.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, the fact of the matter is that 13-1 season and the contract that came along with it, at the end of the day, what it has done is it has bought Mike Norvell a second chance, because, and what they say you got to make the most of second chances, right? Because you don't get a lot of second chances in life in any one particular capacity, and because of that contract, Mike does have a second chance. To your point, he gets a reset because of that 13-1 season and the contract that he signs. And now he's got to go out and prove not only to his fan base, but to these prospects that Florida State knew what they were doing when they extended him. And he's got to show that these hires are going to be what starts turning this program around, with bringing Gus Malzahn and Herb Hand and Tim Harris Jr. and Tony White and Terrence Knight and Evan Cooper. And this program is going to get going in the right direction. So yes, he does have a second chance, and now he's got to make the most of it. And if he does, recruiting will improve.
Yep.
I don't think there's all right. So
nope.
We took you to an hour today. Now, usually we do recruiting previews on Friday. We will probably wait till tomorrow before we put out the written version of the preview, simply because we want to see overnight if there's any more additions or subtractions to the official visit list. But we will have that tomorrow at theosceola.com. We typically have Lulu on to preview FSU baseball on Wednesdays. Obviously, he is traveling with the baseball team out to Corvallis today, so he could not be on. So we're going to get with Lulu later tonight, and we're either going to do a podcast with him tomorrow or Friday. We would just depends on what his schedule. He did not know what his schedule is when I talked to him yesterday. So we'll probably run it Thursday. If we can get him on Thursday, we'll probably do a Thursday show. That way people have 2 days to listen to the pod about the preview as Florida State heads into Oregon State for the Super Regional. If we can't get him till Friday, we'll probably try to go live at 3, which would be noon his time and 6 hours before first pitch. So I believe that math is right. No, that's not right. 3 hours before. So we'll try to. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not good at math.
We're journalists, not mathematicians.
I'm not a math guy. I'm a
mathematicians.
I'm a history broken English guy. So that's what I am. So we'll have Lulu. Our hope is to have Lulu on with either Kurt and myself, or Kurt sometime before first pitch on Friday, but it could be Thursday or Friday. So gives you a reason to hit the notification button and subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel so that you know when Lulu is coming on. And listen, when we went out to San Francisco to play Cal, he had some great side stories outside of baseball. So you will learn a little bit about Portland and Corvallis from Lulu, as well as Oregon State. Now, Kurt Weiler does have one of his previews for the Oregon State series already up at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. So go there, check it out. Nick and I will be back on Monday. It'll be we have a lot to talk about. We'll have as much post-official visit coverage as we can. Now, they have 3 big-time visitors coming in on Monday morning and afternoon, including Keyshawn Henderson, the 5-star quarterback from Houston, Texas. So we will have a lot to talk about. So we will preview those official visits and obviously come back Wednesday, hopefully. Wednesday may be a baseball show because you and I may be out the Moore Center covering Keyshawn's exit. So
it's about to get crazy.
Yes, it is about to get crazy. It's about to get crazy. So, but anyway, all that to say this: go to theosceola.com, check out Kurt Weiler's coverage of the baseball team. We've got all the articles from and video interviews from this past weekend's official visitors. There's 6 kids in town. The only guy we did not talk to was Sam Roseborough, so you can see what the other 5 kids had to say post-visit. But go to theosceola.com, and we will see you on Thursday or Friday with our man Lulu to talk Florida State, Oregon State Super Regional from Corvallis. Everyone have a great Wednesday, and we will see you either tomorrow or Friday, and Nick and I will for sure see you on Monday.